You're fired. Clarina, now bend down and pick up your little career. Preston Vale said it loud enough for the entire trading floor to hear, then slammed a red termination folder against my chest. The papers burst open and scattered across the carpet like confetti at a funeral. Nobody moved. I looked at the papers near my heels. 14 years at Valebridge Capital. And apparently, this was my farewell ceremony. Before I explain why his smile vanished less than 3 minutes later, please hit the like button, because this story has only just begun. I'm also curious. Where are you watching from, and what's the temperature like there today? My name is Clarina Scott. Until that morning, I was the director of institutional strategy. I managed risk models, protected client portfolios, and kept billion-dollar investors from walking away whenever leadership made another brilliant decision with money that did not belong to them. Preston Vale was the CEO's son. That was his resume, the whole glittering document. 6 months earlier, his father had made him chief growth officer because apparently being born near a boardroom now counted as financial expertise. Since then, Preston had treated client capital like poker chips and treated anyone who questioned him like office furniture with a pulse. And the reason for the dismissal for misconduct, sabotage, and refusing direct leadership instructions. He announced. I stared at him. You mean I refused to sign the investor report you changed after compliance rejected it? His smile tightened. Careful. Clarina, desperate women say desperate things. The humiliation burned. But I did not bend down. Security! Preston snapped. Escort her out. I removed my badge and placed it on the nearest desk. Are you sure you want me gone right now? Preston laughed. I've been waiting for this day. Then the elevator doors opened. Elliot Mercer stepped out, founder and chairman of Mercer Global Holdings, Valebridge's largest institutional investor, and the man behind a $2.1 billion capital commitment. He looked at the papers, then at me, then at Preston, and suddenly, Preston's smile vanished. Just so you know, this story is fictional and created with the help of AI to make it more vivid and engaging. Still, I believe the emotions inside it will feel real, and the lessons behind it will stay with you long after the story ends. Now, let's keep going. To understand why Preston wanted me gone, you need to know what I had been to Valebridge before he learned how to spell portfolio. I joined the firm at 26, carrying a cheap briefcase, a used laptop, and the ridiculous belief that hard work was always rewarded. For 14 years. I arrived before sunrise, left after the cleaning crew, and built the risk system everyone later called the backbone of the firm. It tracked exposure across 83 accounts, flagged weak assets before they turned poisonous, and once saved Valebridge from a $312 million loss in municipal bonds. Clients trusted me because I told them the truth. If a deal was weak, I said so. If a projection was fantasy, I killed it. That honesty kept 5 pension funds, 2 university endowments, and 1 very impatient insurance group from walking out the door. Then Preston Vale arrived with a title bigger than his skill set. His father made him chief growth officer, which sounded impressive until he opened his mouth. Preston loved words like velocity, disruption, and aggressive optimism. He said them often, usually while staring at charts he clearly did not understand. In his first month, he proposed investing $96 million in a logistics startup because, and I quote, their branding feels scalable. Their balance sheet, unfortunately, felt bankrupt. I stopped that deal, then another, then a third. That was when Preston stopped pretending to like me. He hated that clients called my phone first. He hated that his father asked for my opinion in meetings. Most of all, he hated that I could read numbers without needing applause. So he smiled in public and cut me out in private. One Friday night, reviewing files before the Mercer meeting, I noticed something missing. My name was gone from the original risk reports. In its place were polished versions I had never approved, with losses softened, warnings deleted, and Preston's signature shining at the bottom, like a medal for lazy theft. After I found my name missing from the original reports, I stopped trusting every number Preston touched. At first, The changes looked small. A projected 6% return became 9. A delayed payment became pending strategic timing. A portfolio with 3 failing assets was suddenly labeled temporarily undervalued. Wall Street has always loved polite language for ugly truths. But Preston had turned it into performance art. By the second week, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The quarterly report claimed profits were up 18%, yet our cash reserves were shrinking. A private real estate fund was valued at $640 million. Even though a third of its properties were tied up in lawsuits, a green energy startup Preston called the future of American infrastructure had missed payroll twice and owned one prototype battery that overheated. When I challenged him, Preston leaned back in his office and smiled. "Clarina, you have to stop thinking like an auditor. These are growth narratives. Growth narratives do not pay investors." I said, "Cash does." He laughed like I had made a joke. Then came his favorite phrase, unrecognized upside. That was Preston's magic wand. Losses became unrecognized upside. Bad debt became delayed opportunity. Missing revenue became future confidence. If Excel had feelings, it would have filed a harassment complaint. So I started protecting myself. Quietly, carefully, legally. I saved what crossed my desk. Email threads, draft reports, time-stamped spreadsheets, notes from meetings, system logs showing when files were edited and by whom. I printed nothing. I stole nothing. I simply kept records of documents I had been asked to review because I could feel the floor shifting beneath me. Every day, my anxiety grew sharper. Preston was not just lying to investors. He was building a version of reality where I would look responsible when it collapsed. Late Thursday evening, just as I was leaving, my phone buzzed. An email from HR, subject notice of behavioral review. I opened it in the elevator and felt my stomach drop. Preston had made his first move. The HR email led to a meeting the next morning in conference room 12, with a table long enough to make bad news look official. When I walked in, Preston was already seated at the head of the table. Beside him sat Marlene from HR, 2 attorneys, and Graham Vale, the CEO, looking tired enough to confuse cowardice with wisdom. On the screen behind them was a report I recognized immediately, except it had been butchered. My name sat at the bottom as approving strategist. I had never approved it. Preston folded his hands. "Clarina, we are concerned about inconsistencies in reports under your supervision." I looked at the screen. "Those numbers are not mine." "Interesting," he said, "because your name is on them." That was the trap, neat, polished, and stupidly confident. Just like him. Marlene slid a packet toward me. Inside were email excerpts, chat screenshots, and internal notes. Every piece had been trimmed like a bad haircut. A sentence where I questioned inflated valuations became proof that I managed valuation adjustments. A message where I asked compliance for clarification became evidence that I anticipated regulatory exposure. Preston even produced a memo claiming I had resisted oversight. Apparently, asking for source data was now emotional instability with a keyboard. I felt anger press against my ribs, but I kept my voice even. "This is not a review," I said. "This is a trial where the verdict was written before I sat down." Graham looked away. That hurt more than Preston's smirk. Preston leaned forward. "Careful. Cooperation will affect how we describe your departure." There it was. The threat, gift-wrapped as policy. I opened my laptop to show the time-stamped originals, but my access had been restricted. Preston watched me try and almost smiled. Then my phone buzzed. A security alert from the document system. My account had just approved the Mercer investor report. At that moment, I was sitting in front of 6 witnesses, nowhere near my desk. The security alert stayed on my phone like a threat with a timestamp. By morning, I knew Preston had chosen his ending for me. He did not want a quiet resignation. Quiet would leave room for questions. He needed a spectacle loud enough to make everyone remember my shame instead of his forged trail. At 8:41, I stepped off the elevator and saw the audience waiting. HR stood near reception. Two security guards blocked the hallway to my office. Preston waited beside the monitors, holding another red folder. Because apparently villains believe in branding, he raised his voice before I reached my desk. Clarina Scott is no longer authorized to access Veil Bridge systems. Every conversation died. Marlene read from a prepared statement, her voice flat. Ms. Scott has been terminated for ethical violations, unauthorized manipulation of investor materials, and conduct that placed client assets at risk. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the lie was dressed professionally. Around me stood people I had trained, protected, and promoted. Jason, whose model I fixed before a pension client saw it. Priya, whose mistake I covered during her first quarter. Ben, who once cried in my office because Preston humiliated him over a typo. They all looked down. Fear is efficient in open-plan offices. Preston stepped closer. Hand over your laptop, phone, and badge. My account approved a report while I was in a meeting with 6 witnesses. I said. His expression barely moved. Legal can review that after you leave. There it was. The door closing, the trap tightening. I placed my laptop on the desk, then my badge. My hands were steady, though my chest felt hollow. Escort her out, Preston ordered. A guard reached for my arm. If you think Preston Vale was right to fire me in front of everyone and accuse me without proof, comment fair. But if you think what he did was cruel, cowardly, comment injustice. I want to know which side you're on, because this was the moment everything changed. Then the elevator chimed. Elliot Mercer stepped out, founder and chairman of Mercer Global Holdings, Veil Bridge's largest institutional investor. He glanced at Preston, then at the guard's hand. Clarina, he said, you're coming with me to the investor meeting. Elliot did not ask permission. He walked past Preston, past HR, past the security guards, and headed straight for the private elevator to the 42nd floor. I followed him with my heart beating so loudly I could barely hear Preston sputtering behind us. Inside the boardroom, Graham Vale was already waiting with 3 directors and 2 lawyers. The city glittered beyond the glass, which felt almost insulting. Downstairs, I had been treated like a criminal. Up here, everyone suddenly remembered manners. Elliot placed his leather folder on the table. I want the original Mercer risk report, he said. Not the summary, not the polished version, the original file. Preston forced a laugh. Elliot, we are handling an internal personnel matter. Clarina manipulated certain materials, and we are reviewing the damage. Elliot turned to him. I did not ask for theater. The room went quiet. I opened my personal laptop. I cannot access company servers anymore, but I have records of files sent to me for review, Preston snapped. Those are confidential. They are also evidence. I said. I showed the original valuation for the Green Corps position, $410 million. Then the version Preston sent to Mercer, $690 million. I showed his email asking me to soften downside language. I showed the system alert proving my account approved the report while I was trapped in conference room 12. I showed the edit history attached to Preston's assistant terminal. One director whispered. My God. Preston pointed at me. She is framing me. Elliot finally opened his folder and slid out a copy of the same false report, with my name printed under strategic approval, so you used her reputation to make me trust your lie, he said. Preston had no answer. Amazing. Really? The man loved speaking until facts entered the room. Elliot took out his phone and called his general counsel. Activate the emergency withdrawal clause. He said, all of it. The full $2.1 billion. Today. Then he looked at me. Clarina, I need your witness statement, right now, before they interfere. I signed Elliot's witness statement in a small glass office, while Preston shouted somewhere beyond the hallway, for 9 minutes. I thought the worst was over. That was generous of me. Preston Vale had never met a shovel he did not want to use on himself. At 2:16 p.m., my personal phone started buzzing. Then it buzzed again. And again. Former clients, junior analysts, even a reporter I had spoken to once during a market panel. I opened my email and saw why. Subject: Important Client Protection Notice. Preston had sent it to the entire client distribution list. According to him, I had been terminated for manipulating investor materials, concealing valuation errors, and placing client assets at risk. He wrote that Veilbridge had acted swiftly to remove the responsible party. He even thanked clients for their trust, which was adorable. Considering he had just set that trust on fire and called it leadership, my hands went cold. This was not office politics anymore. This was my name, my career, my mortgage, my son's school tuition, everything. In finance, reputation is currency. Preston was trying to bankrupt mine before the truth reached the door. I showed Elliot the email. He read it once. His expression did not change. Good, he said. I stared at him. Good. He defamed you in writing, to clients, board members, and outside counsel. That is not a defense strategy. That is a gift basket for your attorney. Within 30 minutes, Elliot's legal team released a formal response. It identified me as the whistleblower, not the culprit. Attached were the original Green Core valuation, Preston's altered version, the edit logs, and his email asking me to soften the risk language. By 5 p.m., financial news sites had the story. By 7:30, Veilbridge clients were demanding answers. At 9:12 that night, Elliot forwarded me one final message. It was from the SEC. They were opening a formal investigation. And just like that, Preston's private cover-up became a public disaster with government letterhead and a timestamp he could not erase. By the next morning, Veilbridge was no longer a company. It was a fire alarm wearing a logo. At 7:05, the first pension fund demanded an emergency redemption. By 8:22, university endowments followed. Before lunch, institutional clients had requested withdrawals totaling $870 million. And that did not include Elliot's $2.1 billion already leaving through the emergency clause. Banks moved faster than gossip. One credit line was frozen, then another, by noon. Veilbridge's parent company had dropped 46%, which was impressive. In the same way a piano falling from a skyscraper is impressive. I watched it unfold from Elliot's legal office, exhausted and strangely calm. Then Marissa Dane walked in. Marissa had been Veilbridge's compliance officer until she resigned 6 weeks earlier. Officially, she left for personal reasons. In reality, Preston had pushed her out after she refused to certify his numbers. She carried a small recorder and the expression of a woman who had waited long enough to enjoy accuracy. I have something, she said. The recording was only 4 minutes long, but it buried him. Preston's voice came through clearly. As long as Clarina's name is on the report, Mercer won't question it. She's the credibility. Use it. There it was. Not misunderstanding. Not aggressive optimism. Fraud with a haircut. Elliot sent the audio to the board within minutes. By 3 p.m., Preston was ordered to surrender his laptop, phone, access cards, and company vehicle. He refused at first. Naturally, men like Preston always believe consequences are just suggestions for poorer people. Security escorted him to the executive suite, while directors whispered behind closed doors. Then Graham Vail resigned. The statement said he was stepping down to protect the firm's future, a poetic phrase for "I let my son drive the bus into a courthouse." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt the first clean breath in months. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. You think this is over? Clarina, I still have one document that can shut your mouth forever. Preston had lost his throne, but he was not done burning the castle yet. Preston's final weapon arrived the next morning, wrapped in the elegant stupidity of a leaked document. A financial blogger posted a wire transfer showing that I had supposedly received $250,000 from a Green Core advisory account 2 weeks before I challenged the valuation. Within an hour, the headline spread everywhere: former Veilbridge strategist accused of secret commission. For a moment, my stomach dropped. Then I opened the file. Fear lasted about 12 seconds. After that, professional insult took over. The account number listed under my name was not mine. The bank address was wrong. The electronic signature format had been retired 2 years earlier, and the date stamp used a template Veilbridge had stopped using after a software update in March. Preston had not forged a document. He had assembled a collage with confidence. Elliot's attorney, Dana Ruiz, leaned over my shoulder. "Can you prove it?" I clicked Properties. There it was. Created 2:14 a.m. Author device PVALE-EXEC-03. I looked at Dana. "Does that help?" She smiled for the first time all week. "That helps beautifully." By noon, we had sent the file, metadata, and chain of custody notes to the SEC. Dana also filed an emergency defamation and evidence tampering notice against Preston personally. Not Veilbridge. Preston. His name. His device. His fingerprints all over the dumbest fake in financial history. Reporters gathered outside Elliot's office by 3 o'clock. I expected a denial statement. Instead, Elliot stepped to the microphones. "Today, we are announcing the launch of Mercer Scott Capital," he said. "A new investment firm built on transparency, discipline, and accountability." My breath caught. Then he turned slightly toward me. "Clarina Scott will serve as managing partner." Cameras flashed. My phone erupted. For the first time that week, I did not feel hunted. I felt dangerous, steady, and completely awake again, somewhere. I imagined Preston watching the announcement and learning a valuable lesson. If you try to bury someone with fake paper, make sure you do not leave your name in the file. 3 months later, Veilbridge Capital filed for bankruptcy protection, which sounded cleaner than admitting Preston had turned a respected firm into a cautionary PowerPoint. The SEC investigation expanded. Preston lost his title, his license, and the industry connections he had mistaken for loyalty. His sports car was repossessed outside the tower where he once ordered security to escort me out. I heard he blamed market hostility. Naturally, accountability has always been a foreign language to men like him. Graham Vail disappeared from public life. The board sold what was left of the firm to repay clients, and Elliot made sure the innocent employees were not abandoned. We hired some. We referred others. I called Sarah, Jason, and Marissa myself. Nobody who had been trapped under Preston's ego deserved to sink with him. Mercer Scott Capital opened Monday. My name was on the glass door. Clarina Scott, managing partner. I stood there for too long, remembering the red folder, the silent coworkers, the security guard's hand near my arm. Then I walked inside and quietly built the kind of firm I had always wanted to work for. Real numbers, clear risks, no pretty lies dressed up as strategy. 6 weeks later, my attorney forwarded an email from Preston's lawyer. Preston wanted to negotiate a public apology in exchange for reduced personal exposure. I read it twice, then smiled, for once. He wanted to put the truth on record. So I replied with one sentence. Tell him to put it in writing. For years, I thought staying quiet was the price of survival. But the truth has a way of standing up when we finally stop protecting the people who hurt us. Clarina's journey taught me 3 lessons I will carry with me. First, integrity may feel lonely in the beginning, but it becomes your strongest evidence when everything falls apart. Second, never let someone with power convince you that your value depends on their approval. Third, when people try to erase your work, keep your records, keep your dignity, and keep moving forward. Which lesson left the deepest impression on you? Your voice matters here, and your story may encourage someone else who feels invisible today. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, like the video, and share it with someone who needs strength. See you in the next story.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, Cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.